There are lands where humans set foot, only to realize they are not the only ones watching. There are places where every law of nature seems to bend, where you can no longer tell what is real and what is an illusion. In northeastern Utah, among miles of desolate wilderness, there exists such a ranch. People call it by many names: the Valley of Mystery, the gateway to another world. But the name that haunts the most, and the one that has become the most famous, is Skinwalker Ranch. Long before white settlers came to claim the area, this land was already steeped in fear for the Navajo people. In the stories they whispered around campfires, there was a creature called Ye Naldlushi, which means one who goes on all fours. It was no longer human, but a corrupted shaman, one who had used forbidden rituals to transform into an animal hunting at night. In the West, we know them by a chilling word: Skinwalker. The Navajo believed that merely speaking its name could bring misfortune. Skinwalkers could appear in the guise of wolves, dogs, or even giant crows. Their eyes glowed in the dark, and they didn't just kill, they cursed entire families, bringing ruin upon them. The Ute people, another tribe living nearby, even claimed that the land itself was cursed after a conflict with the Navajo. From that moment, the ground here became a dead field where evil spirits roamed freely. Centuries later, when the legends had faded into distant echoes, an ordinary family decided to move in. They did not believe in demons or curses. To them, this vast ranch was a chance to rebuild their lives, and it was they, through their haunting experiences, who propelled Skinwalker Ranch from folklore into one of America's most infamous mysteries. That family was the Shermans. Tom and Ellen Sherman were ordinary American farmers with dreams of raising cattle, building a ranch, and securing a future for their children. In the early 1990s, they found a property for sale in the Uintah Basin, a remote valley in Utah. The land stretched over 480 acres with grasslands, forests, and even streams. The price was so cheap it seemed almost suspicious. To Tom, it was a once-in-a-lifetime bargain. The contract was signed quickly, but on the very first day they set foot there, the Shermans noticed something strange. Every door and window of the main house and barns had odd locks. Some were reinforced with heavy steel latches on the outside, as if the previous owners were trying to lock something in, or keep something out. The yard was scattered with tall wooden posts, each topped with massive chains clearly meant to restrain large guard dogs. But when Tom asked the neighbors, no one gave a straight answer. Tom wasn't superstitious. He laughed it off, thinking the old owners were overly cautious. The family moved in, released the cattle onto the pastures, and began their new life. But within days, they would encounter something they could never explain. That afternoon, Tom and his son were herding cattle when, from the distance, a massive gray figure appeared. At first, they thought it was a wolf, but as it drew closer, Tom froze. The creature was at least 3 times the size of a normal wolf. Its fur was silvery gray, thick and shining, its eyes glowing blue like lights in the mist. The strangest part wasn't its size, but its behavior. It seemed friendly. The beast approached slowly, without growling. It let the Sherman children come near, even pet it. Ellen, watching from the porch, smiled faintly, assuming it was just a tame stray. Tom even stretched out his hand, and the creature nuzzled against it like a domesticated dog. But just as their guard dropped, disaster struck. In a blur, the giant wolf lunged at the calves, clamping its jaws around one. It dragged the helpless animal as if it were a toy. Tom and his son panicked, beating it with sticks, but the blows bounced off its dense fur. Finally, Tom drew his .357 Magnum revolver, a weapon powerful enough to kill a bear, and fired point blank at its head. The gun roared. The wolf flinched slightly, then turned and stared at Tom. Its icy gaze seemed to say, "You cannot kill me." Tom fired again and again. Blood sprayed, but the beast did not fall. Instead, it slowly backed away, eyes still fixed on the family, before releasing the calf and calmly walking off into the distance. Tom, shaken, emptied the rest of his rounds into it. Still, the creature did not run. The family followed its blood trail across the pasture, desperate for answers. But midway across a clearing, the trail ended. No more blood, no more tracks. It was as if the beast had evaporated into thin air. That evening, the Shermans sat in silence on the porch. Ellen clutched their children, trembling. Tom kept repeating, "That was no wolf." I don't know what it was, but it was not a wolf. That night, the Utah sky was pitch black. Out on the prairie, the wind howled through dry cactus shrubs, carrying with it the raw, earthy scent of stone and dust. Tom lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Every time he shut his eyes, the glowing blue gaze of that giant wolf flashed before him, as if it were still watching from the darkness. Around midnight, when everyone else in the house was asleep, Tom heard something unusual. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but the sound grew clearer. A metallic clanging, like chains scraping against each other out in the yard. His heart pounded. He quickly grabbed his hunting rifle and crept to the door. Under the pale moonlight, Tom saw the heavy steel chains fastened to the wooden posts, the ones the previous owners had used to tie up massive guard dogs, shaking violently. Yet there was no animal there, no wind, no person, just the chains, rattling on their own. Tom staggered back, gripping the rifle tightly, cold sweat running down his spine. The next morning, Ellen discovered several cows huddled together in the farthest corner of the pasture. They were trembling, eyes wide, foam dripping from their mouths. When Tom approached, he froze in shock. A calf lay motionless on the ground, its body slit open from neck to belly. The flesh had been removed with surgical precision, not torn apart like an animal attack. And strangest of all, there was no blood anywhere around the body. "It's like someone performed surgery," Ellen whispered. Tom inspected carefully. No human footprints, no tire tracks. Only flattened grass, as though something massive had pressed down from the sky. But no matter how he tried, he could find no explanation. In the days that followed, the Shermans began to endure a series of unthinkable phenomena. One evening, while Ellen was cleaning up in the kitchen, she suddenly noticed a face reflected in the window. But it wasn't anyone from the family. It was long, with hollow eyes and a crooked grin, pressed against the glass as if staring inside. Ellen spun around. Nothing was there. But seconds later, when she glanced back, the face appeared again, this time just inches away. Ellen screamed. Tom rushed in, but outside the yard was completely empty. Even their children began to panic. One night, the eldest son ran into their bedroom, shouting that there were lights floating above the fields. At first, Tom thought it was just a meteor. But when he ran out, he saw an orange glowing orb hovering a few meters above the ground. It drifted slowly, then suddenly shot upward at impossible speed, vanishing into the night sky. The incidents only escalated from there. One morning, while Tom was herding cattle across the pasture, a sharp whistling sound echoed from above. Looking up, he saw a massive triangular craft suspended in the sky. It was eerily silent, no engine noise, only faint lights glowing at each of its three corners. The cattle immediately panicked, scattering in all directions. Tom instinctively raised his rifle, but quickly realized it was useless. This thing was larger than his entire house. The object glided silently and disappeared behind the tree line. Ellen, too, witnessed something even more disturbing. While hanging laundry in the yard, she suddenly felt as though she were being watched. Looking up, she froze. About 50 meters away stood a figure. It was humanoid in shape, but over 2 meters tall, its entire body covered in thick black fur. The creature stood motionless, head tilted slightly, as if studying her. Ellen dropped the basket of clothes and bolted into the house in terror. By the time Tom ran out with his hunting rifle, the field was empty, no trace of anything left behind. These relentless events pushed the Sherman family closer to the breaking point. They had moved here with dreams of building a thriving cattle ranch, but now each day was a battle between reason and raw fear. Tom began documenting everything: times, dates, locations, and phenomena. He wanted proof, something to show he wasn't losing his mind. His notebook filled quickly, crammed with accounts, blue lights appearing inside the barn, whispers emanating from the walls, the stench of sulfur filling the kitchen with no fire or source. But the most haunting entry came one autumn afternoon, when Tom once again confronted the immortal wolf. He was checking the fence line when suddenly, from the woods, those blazing blue eyes emerged. The giant wolf stepped out, this time without its earlier calm demeanor. It growled, baring glistening fangs. Within seconds, the cattle behind Tom erupted into chaos. Tom fired immediately. The bullet struck its flank. He heard the impact clearly, but the creature only staggered back slightly, then turned away, casually walking back into the forest. Tom gave chase, following its heavy paw prints across the dirt, until, once again, they ended abruptly at an empty clearing. He stood frozen, rifle clutched in his hands, one thought pounding in his mind. Something is playing with us. And this was only the beginning of the nightmarish chain of events that would turn Skinwalker Ranch into the greatest mystery in America. Nearly a week after the second encounter with the blue eyes, the absurdity escalated as if an invisible hand had suddenly cranked up the ranch's volume knob to maximum. Each morning, the barn looked slightly different, objects out of place. A bucket that Tom had left by the door the night before now perched on a roof beam. A neatly stacked hay pile mysteriously split into smaller mounds, arranged in perfect circular patterns like drawn with a compass. Tom, being meticulous, checked for footprints. There were none. The ground bore only a few scattered hoofprints, otherwise completely undisturbed. Ellen, meanwhile, discovered something bizarre in the kitchen. Every spice jar had been opened and rearranged in alphabetical order. "Who would waste time doing this at 3 a.m, she muttered. The children swore they hadn't gotten up at night. Tom gave a half-hearted laugh. His nearest neighbor was nearly 1.5 miles away. Pulling a prank like that was hardly practical. But as the laughter faded, fear crept in. That night they decided to sleep together in the living room. Tom dragged a chair close to the window, laid his hunting rifle across his lap, and leaned back against the wall, ears straining at every sound. At about 1:47 a.m., Tom remembered the number because he'd checked the clock 100 times. The house suddenly grew cold. The fireplace still glowed red, yet everyone's breath came out in frosty puffs. Then came the footsteps, not the sound of human feet, but heavy, thudding steps, like giant boots pressing into damp wood. The sound began at the front porch, circled around the side, and stopped at the back door. Ellen clutched Tom's hand. He gave a small nod, sprang to his feet, and yanked the latch open. No one was there, but on the edge of the steps, the snow bore strange, round impressions, perfect circles, like suction cups rather than footprints. Each circle was spaced exactly a hand's width apart, leading out into the yard, before abruptly ending in mid-air at the slope, as though whatever made them had simply continued walking across invisible steps. The next morning, Tom did the only thing he knew best: take action. He inspected every inch of the fence, tightened the barbed wire, and added new padlocks to the barn doors. He also brought home 2 large hunting dogs from a friend in a neighboring town, fierce, agile, and most importantly, steady around gunfire. "You'll stand guard tonight," Tom said, patting each dog on the head. That night was quiet, too quiet. Until around 3 a.m, the cursed hour often called the witching hour, when growls erupted outside. The two dogs bolted like arrows toward the tree line. Tom only caught sight of a glowing orb hovering in the dark, no bigger than a fist, shimmering blue, moving in a taunting, deliberate way. The orb lured the dogs the way a giant firefly might tease kittens. "No!" Tom shouted, but it was too late. The growls turned into long, echoing howls, and then silence. By the time he reached the ravine's edge, only the acrid stench of burnt air remained. On the ground were 3 perfect blackened circles, as if the soil had been scorched into molten ash and hardened again. No bodies, no blood, just 3 silent burn marks. Ellen clung to Tom. "We can't live like this anymore." He looked around the ranch, dead dogs, panicked cattle, children jolted awake by invisible whispers. A man had to feed his family, but he also had to keep them alive. The breaking point came one frigid afternoon. Their 4 prize bulls, the family's greatest asset, vanished. Tom frantically searched every barn, every pasture, even considering the possibility of theft. But there were no tire tracks, no drag marks, nothing. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Ellen could only clasp her hands and pray, and then, the most absurd thing of all. From inside an old steel trailer, used as a storage shed and rarely opened, came the sound of heavy breathing. The doors, weighing nearly half a ton and always padlocked, rattled. Tom rushed over, his heart hammering. The lock was still intact. He shoved with his shoulder. The door burst open. Inside stood all 4 bulls. Every one of them, not just one. They were pressed so tightly together it looked unnatural, like frozen statues. Their eyes bulged, pupils blown wide, sweat dripping down their flanks. Not one made a sound. The air reeked of ammonia. For 2 full seconds, Tom and Ellen simply could not comprehend who or what could have crammed 4 one-ton animals through a sealed door. And why did they stand locked in place as though hypnotized? Tom rushed in, fumbling with the latch, trying to coax them out. At last, a guttural grunt escaped the throat of the largest bull, and suddenly, as if shaken awake, all 4 erupted. They exploded out of the trailer, nearly trampling Tom, smashing tools to the ground. They tore across the yard in a blind panic, slamming into fences like creatures desperate to escape death itself. Ellen held her head in her hands, gasping. "Is someone playing with us?" she asked, but it was only a formality. Both of them knew the answer. The rumors spread across the fields. In a place as sparsely populated as the Uintah Basin, any story could become gossip at the lone checkout counter of the general store. The Shermans? You mean that ranch with the iron posts thick as your wrist? The old owners, strange folks. And then came the whispers, strange lights, unnaturally tall figures, cattle trembling without reason. Some advised Tom to sell the place, while you still can. But sell to who? Who would be crazy enough to buy a property the entire valley spoke of only in hushed tones? The answer came in a way no one expected. A man in Las Vegas heard the stories and offered to buy the ranch outright. He was rich, very rich, so wealthy that townsfolk froze at the mere mention of his name, Robert Bigelow. He was known for investing in aerospace, for founding an institute dedicated to studying unusual things. In other words, Bigelow had money, resources, and an endless curiosity. "We want to research the phenomena there," his representative said over the phone. Tom looked at Ellen. "Sell, leave this place, and let someone else deal with the unseen, or stay and gamble with their children's future?" Ellen nodded. "We're leaving." Weeks later, a convoy of trucks snaked down the dirt road leading to the ranch. Men in heavy jackets and baseball caps unloaded crates tangled with wires and instruments, They erected camera towers, scattered thermal sensors, set up radiation counters, magnetic field meters, satellite dishes pointing skyward. The entire ranch transformed into a bizarre open-air laboratory. Locals stood at a distance, watching as if it were a circus. This group called themselves NIDS, National Institute for Discovery Science, a team of scientists, former intelligence officers, veterinarians, engineers, and even a few who claimed to have heightened intuition. They weren't there to tell ghost stories. They were there to measure every milligauss, every microtesla, every milliröntgen. On the first night, NIDS ran cables and powered up a cluster of infrared cameras aimed at the tree line where the blue orb had appeared days earlier. Inside their control trailer, the team watched grainy black and white monitors flicker with static snow. One researcher jotting notes glanced up and froze. In the upper left corner of the screen, an oval-shaped patch of darkness slid across the frame, gone in a blink. "Rewind," he whispered. The technician rolled it back, slowed it down. The image warped with static interference. Nothing there. "Could be just a glitch," someone muttered. By midnight, alarms blared. 3 cameras on the western tower went dark simultaneously. 2 men grabbed flashlights and sprinted outside. The wind howled. Dust devils spun violently across the dirt. They shone their beams on the cameras, lenses intact. Wires, gone. Not cut, not frayed, gone. A length of cable several meters long, along with the junction box, had been ripped out clean. Not snapped, but as if something had passed through and pulled it from inside its casing, leaving no trace of copper. They swept their lights across the ground. No footprints, no drag marks. It was as if an invisible hand had reached out, yanked everything away, and then simply stopped. "Replace it tomorrow morning," the team leader said, forcing his voice to sound calm. "And set up more cameras. Record the cameras themselves." They did exactly that. 2 weeks later, the camera-watching cameras rig captured something remarkable. In just 3 seconds, the junction box was stripped of its screws. The lid fell to the ground, and the cable vanished. No hands, no tools, no figure appeared. The darkness surrounding the box simply grew denser, like a thick black cloth draped over it, and then receded. End of event. In the scientific logbook they wrote, "Anomalous opacity event. The more forbidden a thing is, the more people want to see it." On nights when nothing showed on the monitors, the researchers went out on patrol. One of them, Miller, a tall, gray-eyed former security officer, wandered to the canal where locals spoke of running lights. Setting down his magnetometer, he switched on his headlamp and bent to measure ion levels. Silence. He switched the lamp off, letting his eyes adjust to the Utah dark. Stars scattered above like spilled salt. Miller exhaled, his breath turning to mist, and then something impossible happened quietly before him. Mid-air, about 2 meters above the ground, the night seemed to fracture. A thin seam appeared, no wider than a hair, then widened like the slit of a cat's eye. Through that opening, Miller swore. It was not Utah night he saw. There was a burnt orange sky, like sunset, a jagged silhouette of unfamiliar mountains, and glowing blue specks darting about like insects of another world. A chill surged down his spine. He snapped his light on instinctively, and the slit clamp shut, vanishing as though it had never been. His magnetometer spiked from 46 microtesla to 120, then dropped back to 47. The radiation detector quivered but stayed within normal limits. In his report, Miller called it a window. The team leader crossed out the word portal, worried it sounded too dramatic. A week later, the window returned. This time, 3 witnesses saw it, 2 engineers and a veterinarian. They shone a low-powered laser into it. The beam didn't pass through. "It's like aiming at a soft wall," one of them whispered. The window sealed itself shut in under 10 seconds. The three men walked back to the control trailer in silence. No one dared to say the word portal. Meanwhile, the cattle continued to suffer. The clean mutilations returned, tongues neatly excised, as if with surgical tools, ears clipped into perfect circles, eyes removed without a trace of blood. The veterinarian shook his head. No infection, no tearing, no struggle. If humans had done this, there would be lights, tents, tracks. Here, it's as though it was performed in a vacuum. The word vacuum echoed inside the container like the closing of a coffin lid. NIDS tried everything. They strapped small data loggers onto the cattle, tracking heart rate, GPS location, activity levels. They saturated the hot zones with cameras. They even pitched observation tents, taking shifts to sleep out in the fields in hopes of meeting it head-on. The result? The closer they watched, the more it avoided them. On nights when they kept strict vigil, the herd remained calm. On nights when they relaxed, by morning something had happened. It was nothing less than a grotesque game of hide-and-seek, where the one hiding, was always several steps smarter than the seekers. Sometimes, it didn't bother to hide at all. One dawn, the entire team heard a deep humming, like a massive transformer overloaded with current. The sound didn't come from one direction, but from everywhere, above their heads, beneath the ground, inside the wooden walls, inside their ears. Magnetometers went wild. A compass spun endlessly on the table like a top. The men with military training spread out, flashlights ready. "Kill the lights," the team leader ordered. In the darkness, a long, thin object emerged over the pasture, not moving like it was flying, but rather sliding, like a shadow sliding across a wall. It emitted no glow, but it blotted out the stars wherever it passed. "It's like a black sheet being pulled over the sky," someone whispered. The object stopped over the cattle barn. Suddenly the barn doors slammed open with a crash, though the locks were still in place. The herd inside erupted in chaos. The team sprinted forward, beams of light cutting through the dark, only to see the black sheet contract, pulled tight as though sucked backward, knotting into a small point before winking out. Everything returned to silence. The locks were intact, the doors still closed, and yet inside the three cows had swapped places, as if they'd been shuffled like cards. "No more games," the team leader rasped. "I accept the word intelligence." In his report he wrote, "The phenomenon demonstrates intentionality, reacts to the observer, and exhibits a quality of apparent awareness of surveillance systems. News traveled beyond the ranch faster than the wind. Reporters camped by the gate. Tabloid stringers staked out the hillsides. Spiritual groups even sent emails asking permission to perform ceremonies. NIDS shut the gates tighter, added more fencing, and hired guards. They weren't making a TV show. They wanted data. If something exists here, we'll capture it with evidence," one young scientist muttered, dark circles under his sleepless eyes. But sometimes, the evidence seemed to mock them. One winter morning, a fresh layer of snow revealed a trail of round prints, identical to the suction cup tracks Tom had once described. They appeared about 50 meters beyond the fence, marched in a perfectly straight line into the field, and then stopped abruptly in the middle of the pasture. No turning back, no scuffle, no leap, just stopped. NIDS measured the spacing with rulers, photographed from wide angles, logged the GPS coordinates, and admitted defeat. Just another message, left like a riddle for coffee table debates. By this point, you might ask, what's the purpose of all this? Even the most hardened skeptics on the team occasionally slipped, muttering, "It's like something is testing our reactions." And for those who still believed the old tales of the Ute and Navajo, the ancient explanation clawed its way back to the surface. There are beings who walk on four legs. There are curses laid upon this land. There are boundaries between our world and something else. One night, Miller and a colleague, Clark, went to the stream, the place where the window had once opened. Miller wore a new generation night vision scope, while Clark carried a thermal imager. The water whispered softly, the wind bending reeds like strands of hair. Clark fixed his eyes on the thermal screen, ambient temperature uniform, no hot spots. Miller swept his scope across the boulders. "See anything?" Clark asked. "No." Miller began, then suddenly froze. In the scope, between two trees, something moved. Not a hot spot, but a cold one. A figure taller than a man, colder than the night sky, colder even than the water. It glided forward. With each step, the grass did not stir, but its presence sent ripples across the stream, against the direction of the wind. Clark shifted his lens. On infrared, the cold entity looked like a negative bubble on an X-ray, standing face to face with them for a few seconds, then stretching like taffy, collapsing and vanishing. Through Miller's night vision scope, however, there was nothing, only darkness. When they returned, Clark's hands shook so badly, he dropped his lighter 3 times. In the report, they wrote, "Anomalous cold entity, deliberate movement, possible camouflage in visible spectrum." The next morning, the old wooden posts in the yard, the ones meant for chaining guard dogs, were all snapped in half, as if something had broken them with one hand. No tire tracks, no axe marks. Just raw wood fibers still fresh with the scent of pine. It was as though the ranch had become a stage for a grotesque play directed by an unseen hand, sometimes featuring the immortal beast, other times opening the red window, other times performing the cattle shuffle like a magic trick. And like all good theater, by the middle act, the audience was no longer just watching, they were being pulled into the story. It began with one team member, the technician who always swore he only believed what he could measure. After a month sleeping in the container, he asked for 3 days leave at home. On the second day, his wife called the ranch, panic in her voice. Last night, the kitchen cabinet opened by itself, all the bottles lined up on the floor in a spiral. Our daughter says a woman with long hair stood at the end of her bed staring. "Did you bring something back with you?" In the meeting room, no one spoke. From then on, the team established a decontamination protocol. Don't talk about the ranch once you leave the ranch. Don't take objects out, and pray if you believe. They whispered a name for it, the Hitchhiker Effect. Amid the chaos, there were moments so absurd they almost made the team laugh. One late night, 2 researchers set a box of donuts on the porch, a rare luxury in such a remote valley. They turned their backs for 10 seconds to adjust instruments. When they looked again, the box was still sealed, but the donuts were gone. Around it were tiny, pitch-black circular tracks, spaced evenly as though measured with a ruler. "Thanks for not taking the box," one of them scribbled in the log, but it did not enjoy being mocked. A few nights later, a knocking began on the container wall. 3 sharp raps, very clear. Miller opened the door, floodlight in hand. Nothing. He stepped back inside. 3 more knocks, like someone politely, but ominously, asking to be let in. On the 3rd round, he rapped back, 3 times. From outside came 4 knocks in reply. A childish game, between men and something unseen. They stopped before the game went any further. At the same time, NIDS began framing the story with a new metaphor, the immune system. One scientist said, "Imagine the ranch as a living organism. We, the intruders, introduce a surveillance system, like a virus. Its immune system responds, shutting down cameras, erasing traces, isolating information. Every time we upgrade, it mutates in turn." The metaphor sounded poetic and terrifying. One night, they decided to do the opposite of their usual strategy. No flood of cameras, no patrols. Instead, they set up a single old film camera hidden in a wooden box triggered by a fishing line strung from the porch, facing the main cattle barn. Mike, an engineer fond of antiques, said, "With this kind, you can't jam it with electromagnetics or cut wires." They turned off all the lights, sat quietly inside. Around 3 a.m., the fishing line snapped. Click. The film was exposed. The team burst out with flashlights, scanning the yard. Silence, exactly as it had been. In the morning, they developed the film with a makeshift mobile kit. The frames emerged, completely black, as if overexposed. But in the corner of the second image, a thin silver streak cut diagonally across the frame, shifting up and down across consecutive frames, like something long, thin, and impossibly fast had passed before the lens. The engineer calculated the ratio, estimating the speed if the streak had been 10 meters from the camera, unusually fast, soundless. Conclusion: no conclusion. That phrase appeared so often in their reports that it became, in itself, the only conclusion. As for the cattle, each mutilation was like a needle piercing the ranch's finances. Bigelow had money to reimburse, but no amount of money could erase the frustration of the men who had to clean the stalls and bury the carcasses. One night, the veterinarian sighed. "In school, we're trained to determine the cause of death. Here, what's killing us is not knowing." Yet it was that same veterinarian who witnessed one of the strangest scenes. A calf, freshly marked with red paint, wandered about 100 meters from the barn. He turned his back for half a minute to bring a tray of samples to the truck. When he looked again, the calf was gone. No drag marks, no scuff marks, nothing. The team spread out and found it, lying atop a birch tree, more than 2.5 meters high, limp, lifeless, without a drop of blood around. Who could lift a calf up there in 30 seconds? A question thrown into the Utah sky unanswered. You might argue it was all just layers of folklore, embroidered tales, but those who had been there, whether farmers or scientists, left carrying something very real, a hollow weight in their gut, a tension that made them glance back at dark corners every night. Science is trained to ask, but here, the subject of study asked back, "Do you think you know what I am?" And just as you formed an answer, it changed the question. One afternoon, Tom returned to the ranch as a guest. Bigelow had invited him to recount his experiences before the team. A rough man, red veins etched in his eyes, calloused hands clutched tightly around a coffee cup. He spoke of the giant wolf, of the 4 bulls crammed inside the steel container, of nights where you could lose something simply by blinking. He used no fancy words. "It doesn't want to kill us, it wants to learn how to scare us," he said. A scientist frowned. "Fear is a biological response." Tom cut him off. "And we are animals. Here, we are the cattle, and it is the rancher." That sentence left the room silent for a few seconds. People don't like being cast in the role of prey, but many nights out in the fields, when orange orbs drifted like giant fireflies, when cold shadows slid across like moving shade, when red windows opened like cat's eyes, they all seemed to whisper the same message: "I see you." A young researcher, blonde, formerly an astronomer, rarely spoke. That night she turned on her personal recorder and quietly spoke, not for the report, but to calm herself. There are places on Earth that don't want to be understood, not because they are evil, but because their very nature is unnameable. To name something is to frame it, to tame it. Here, every frame slips away. We set up cameras. It takes the cables. We lay traps. It goes another way. We aim our lenses. It stains the light black. This place is like a riddle that breathes, and the answer may not be wolf or alien or spirit. The answer is the very feeling of being watched, a mirror held up to science's blind spot, where we thought we had filled every gap with data. Then she gave a self-mocking laugh and switched the recorder off. The next morning, her microcassette was blank. No one knew exactly when the ranch's play turned a new chapter. Perhaps it was when the cattle stopped trampling each other at dawn. Perhaps when the orbs stopped blinking like fish eyes. Or perhaps when those who had stayed there began dreaming the same dream, of a red field and a low sigh like the distant hum of an engine. But change it did. NIDS stayed longer, installed more instruments, wrote more reports cautious, cold, words rationed like monks saving breath. Then one day, the convoy rolled back out, leaving the ranch behind in a haze of dust. Cameras left bare on poles, cables swallowed by the grass, containers sealed with fresh locks. The Utah sky was blindingly blue, as if no night had ever been draped with a black sheet. Tom stood on a different porch now, in another town, far from the land people still whispered about. He had sold, had left, had tried to forget. But at dusk, the sound of chains clanking against wooden posts still echoed in his memory like a church bell. He knew the place was still there, land and rock, stream and reeds. And whatever was unseen, if it was the rancher, perhaps it was still standing there, gazing through centuries as though through glass, waiting for the next herd of humans to step into its pasture. You ask, what happened next? With stories like these, next is always a loop. New owners will arrive. They will set up instruments or lay traps or bring holy symbols, each bringing their own frame. And the ranch, with the patience of ancient earth, will turn the volume knob again, soft or loud, depending on what script today's audience prefers. Giant wolves, red windows, cold shadows, or triple knocks on steel walls. The only ending here is when you turn away. The ranch does not, because there are places where humans set foot, only to realize they are not the only ones watching. And sometimes, the watcher is smiling. After years of failure in collecting solid scientific evidence, Skinwalker Ranch seemed destined to fade into silence. But for those who had once set foot there, that silence was never peaceful. According to many accounts, the phenomena of the ranch were not confined within its barbed wire fences. They seemed to know how to follow people out into the wider world, spreading fear even when you thought you had left the cursed land behind. Researchers from NIDS reported strange occurrences in their own homes after leaving Utah. One scientist claimed that upon returning to Las Vegas, heavy noises, like footsteps circling the house, echoed each night. Doors opened on their own. Dark shadows flitted across the hallway. His loyal dog suddenly barked furiously into empty corners. Even more chilling, one team member swore he saw the very same glowing orb they had once filmed at the ranch, floating silently in his living room before vanishing as if it had never been there at all. This phenomenon earned a spine-chilling name, the Hitchhiker Effect. It suggested that what occurred at Skinwalker Ranch was not the classic form of haunting, bound to a single location. Rather, whatever was there seemed to possess the ability to follow you home, dragging terror along with it, terror you could not shake off. The impossible disappearances. During NIDS' final period at the ranch, at least 2 events became legendary. The first, a newborn calf was placed inside a pen only minutes before the rancher briefly walked away. When he returned, the calf had vanished completely. The gate was still locked, the grass inside untouched, no signs of struggle, everything silent, except for a faint, fleeting cry of pain that seemed to echo from nowhere. After hours of searching, they found nothing. The animal had disappeared as though it had never existed. Another case, a full-grown cow was found dead in the pasture. Its body lay stretched straight, legs extended as if it had been struck down in an instant. No blood, no drag marks. The hide on its flank had been stripped away with surgical precision, the exposed tissue beneath unnaturally cold, as if pre-frozen. Stranger still, around the carcass was a circle of grass pressed flat, like the imprint of something heavy having landed from above. Events like these left researchers baffled. Science could not explain how an animal could vanish in minutes, nor could any predator leave wounds so clean, as if carved with a scalpel. Every hypothesis led to a dead end. Gateways in the sky. One of the most chilling NIDS reports came from the Institute's own director, Colm Kelleher. During a night watch, 2 scientists aimed their infrared scopes at a ridge. There, they saw something impossible, an oval portal of light opening in midair. From within, a massive dark figure crawled out, squeezed through the opening, and dropped to the ground. It rose to its feet, lanky, towering, its 2 eyes glowing bright yellow, staring straight toward them. Seconds later, the gateway closed. Darkness swallowed everything once more. The 2 men, trembling, admitted they had never felt such a bone-deep chill. They were scientists, men of data and measurement, but that night, they confessed they had seen something far beyond the reach of science. The account was preserved in NIDS internal documents and later published in the book Hunt for the Skinwalker. It became one of the hallmark cases supporting the theory that Skinwalker Ranch is a site of interdimensional gateways, a place where some form of intelligence, whether extraterrestrial, demonic, or something else entirely, could pass between worlds. The natives and the Navajo curse. Alongside the scientific efforts, the cultural dimension cannot be ignored. The stories of the Navajo and the Ute. For them, the Uintah Basin was not just land, it was a wound of history. In the 19th century, the tribes fought fiercely, and the Navajo were forced to abandon the region. Before leaving, according to legend, some of their shamans performed forbidden rituals, binding malevolent spirits to the land as an act of revenge. From then on, the skinwalkers roamed freely, spreading fear to anyone daring to settle there. The Ute, who later claimed the territory, believed the ranch lay at the very heart of this cursed land. They avoided it. No hunting, no camping, no dwelling near it. But when white settlers purchased the property, they paid little attention. To them, it was merely cheap real estate. And in time, the price revealed itself. The natives and the Navajo curse. Alongside the scientific efforts, the cultural dimension cannot be ignored. The stories of the Navajo and the Ute. For them, the Uintah Basin was not just land, it was a wound of history. In the 19th century, the tribes fought fiercely, and the Navajo were forced to abandon the region. Before leaving, according to legend, some of their shamans performed forbidden rituals, binding malevolent spirits to the land as an act of revenge. From then on, the skinwalkers roamed freely, spreading fear to anyone daring to settle there. The Ute, who later claimed the territory, believed the ranch lay at the very heart of this cursed land. They avoided it. No hunting, no camping, no dwelling near it. But when white settlers purchased the property, they paid little attention. To them, it was merely cheap real estate. And in time, the price revealed itself. Memories that won't fade. The Sherman family eventually sold the ranch to Robert Bigelow. Later, in interviews, they admitted that even after leaving, the hauntings lingered. Sleepless nights, invisible noises, the dread of stepping into the fields. All of it clung to them like a psychological scar. One of Tom Sherman's most haunting remarks was, "I came here only to raise cattle, but I met something no human should ever face. And I know it's still there." After Robert Bigelow and the NIDS team quietly withdrew from Utah, Skinwalker Ranch slipped into a semi-silence for nearly 2 decades. A tall steel gate, barbed wire fences, warning signs reading "No trespassing" along the dirt road. For locals, it was simply land with an owner, best left alone. But for those who knew the story, Skinwalker Ranch remained a living legend, half fact, half myth, wholly haunting. Then, in 2016, a new figure entered. Brandon Fugal, a Utah real estate tycoon. Known as a practical man who built an empire through business, he had nothing to do with UFOs or the paranormal. Yet during his years of investing, he heard too many rumors about the ranch. Curiosity slowly turned into obsession. At last, he decided to buy the entire property from Bigelow. When signing the deal, Brandon kept his identity hidden. He didn't want his name dragged into tales of mysticism without evidence. But in his heart, he had a clear goal. If the ranch truly was a nexus of strange phenomena, it needed to be studied with modern tools, serious methods, and open transparency. No vagueness, no secrecy. The team of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. After officially announcing his ownership, Brandon assembled a team of experts across disciplines: physicists, engineers, security specialists, pilots, biologists. He branded the project The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, both a research mission and, beginning in 2020, a documentary series broadcast on the History Channel. Heading the scientific effort was Dr. Travis Taylor, a physicist and aerospace engineer who had worked with NASA and the U.S. Department of Defense. Alongside him were Eric Bard, a high-tech engineer specializing in sensors, Thomas Winterton, the ranch superintendent, and a full crew of security staff, drone pilots, and camera operators. Unlike Bigelow, Brandon had no wish to keep things hidden. He opened the gates of the ranch to a global audience, turning every experiment, every anomaly, into live television. This transformed Skinwalker Ranch from obscure reports into a kind of open-air laboratory, one watched weekly by millions. Phenomena under Fugal's ownership. From the very first season, the team documented a series of strange events. And the most frightening part? They aligned almost perfectly with what the Sherman family had reported decades earlier. Mysterious electromagnetic waves. EMF electromagnetic field detectors consistently picked up abnormally strong signals, concentrated around an area known as Homestead 2, abandoned houses dating back to the early 20th century. These signals fluctuated at frequencies with no natural source to account for them. Whenever the readings spiked, drones crashed out of control, phone batteries drained in minutes, and staff members sometimes suffered sudden, severe headaches. The sky opening. In one experiment, the team launched rockets straight up into the air above the ranch. Radar data showed what appeared to be an invisible object blocking their path. Thermal cameras even captured strange streaks of light, eerily reminiscent of the portal events described by the NIDS team years earlier. Unidentified aerial object security cameras repeatedly caught glowing spherical objects darting across the sky in zigzag patterns, sometimes appearing precisely during experiments. The aviation experts on the team confirmed no civilian aircraft, or even known military drones, could achieve such speeds and trajectories. Biological effects. Ranch Superintendent Thomas Winterton was once hospitalized with unexplained brain swelling after a day of digging on the property. Doctors could not determine a cause, but the coincidence alarmed the entire team. They began to realize the ranch posed dangers not only to equipment, but also to the human body. Phenomena under Fugal's ownership. From the very first season, the team documented a series of strange events. And the most frightening part? They aligned almost perfectly with what the Sherman family had reported decades earlier. Mysterious electromagnetic waves. EMF electromagnetic field detectors consistently picked up abnormally strong signals, concentrated around an area known as Homestead 2, abandoned houses dating back to the early 20th century. These signals fluctuated at frequencies with no natural source to account for them. Whenever the readings spiked, drones crashed out of control, Phone batteries drained in minutes, and staff members sometimes suffered sudden, severe headaches. The sky opening. In one experiment, the team launched rockets straight up into the air above the ranch. Radar data showed what appeared to be an invisible object blocking their path. Thermal cameras even captured strange streaks of light, eerily reminiscent of the portal events described by the NIDS team years earlier. Unidentified aerial object security cameras repeatedly caught glowing spherical objects darting across the sky in zigzag patterns, sometimes appearing precisely during experiments. The aviation experts on the team confirmed no civilian aircraft, or even known military drones, could achieve such speeds and trajectories. Biological effects. Ranch Superintendent Thomas Winterton was once hospitalized with unexplained brain swelling after a day of digging on the property. Doctors could not determine a cause, but the coincidence alarmed the entire team. They began to realize the ranch posed dangers not only to equipment, but also to the human body. The shadow figure in Homestead. One of the most terrifying moments caught on camera came when a massive human-shaped shadow was recorded gliding past the window of Homestead 2. At that exact time, no team member was anywhere near the building. The figure was unnaturally tall, its shape distorted, and it vanished after only a few seconds. Security guards searched the site but found nothing. When the episode aired, viewers erupted in debate. Some insisted it was nothing more than a trick of the light, but those familiar with Navajo legends recognized it instantly. The warped silhouette bore a chilling resemblance to the Skinwalker, a shape-shifting sorcerer said to stalk the night. The return of the Hitchhiker Effect. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery was that the phenomena didn't stay confined to the ranch. Multiple members of the team admitted that, after returning home, they began to experience inexplicable events. Shadowy figures in their bedrooms, phantom knocking at the door in the dead of night, and even their family members reporting the same nightmares, dreams of faceless beings standing beside their beds. These accounts echoed the dreaded Hitchhiker Effect, once described by NIDS researchers. It suggested that anyone who stepped foot on the ranch risked carrying something back with them, a darkness that did not respect fences or distance. Brandon Fugal speaks out. What made this project extraordinary was that Brandon Fugal himself, a respected wealthy real estate magnate, appeared on camera and openly admitted, "I'm a practical man. I don't believe in ghosts or demons. But what I and my team have witnessed at the ranch has forced me to acknowledge that there are things beyond current science. I believe this place is a natural laboratory of the universe." His statement catapulted Skinwalker Ranch back into global headlines. A billionaire, with nothing to gain from fabrication, now claiming such things. It left the public stunned, skeptical, but irresistibly intrigued. The three leading hypotheses in recent years. As the secret of Skinwalker Ranch continues, the data and testimonies have slowly consolidated around three main theories. 1. UFO phenomena linked to the Department of Defense. There is mounting evidence that U.S. military pilots have reported unidentified aerial phenomena UAPs directly over the Uintah Basin. Some researchers suggest the ranch lies on a so-called UFO corridor, a route of repeated activity so compelling that even the Pentagon has taken interest. Second, geological energy fields. Other scientists speculate that natural forces under the ranch, uranium deposits, magnetic anomalies, or microwave emissions from the Earth, might trigger hallucinations or electronic interference. Yet such explanations fail to account for recorded footage of towering shadow figures or the infamous bulletproof wolf. 3. A responsive intelligence. The most unnerving hypothesis, that there is an active, conscious intelligence at play. Something that observes, reacts, and deliberately teases humans, showing just enough to terrify, but never enough to prove. This theory aligns with the ranch's long history of cat-and-mouse encounters, where phenomena escalate precisely when investigators attempt to measure them. Why does Skinwalker Ranch captivate us? Perhaps because it refuses to fit neatly into any single category. It is not just a UFO hotspot. It is not just a haunted house. It is a crossroads where folklore, science, military secrecy, and the paranormal all collide. Each visitor, each viewer, finds in Skinwalker Ranch a reflection of their own belief system. UFO enthusiasts see evidence of extraterrestrials, folklorists see echoes of the Navajo curse, skeptics see psychological warfare or covert testing, and spiritual seekers find proof of the unseen. And with every new incident recorded, lights, shadows, mutilations, portals, the same chilling intuition grows stronger. Somewhere on this land, there may be a door, a place where the boundary between our reality and something else grows dangerously thin. Is the door still open? The deeper Brandon Fugal's team investigated, the clearer it became. Skinwalker Ranch is not a mystery you can solve. It is more like a thick book, and with every page you turn, 10 new questions appear. In Season 2, Travis Taylor and the crew decided to dig deeper into the ground, despite repeated warnings that every time you dig, trouble follows. True to the legend, the moment the excavator roared to life, the entire ranch went haywire. Electronic instruments spiked into chaos, cameras fizzled with static, drones dropped from the sky like autumn leaves, and Travis himself collapsed, suffering sudden chest pressure and a dangerous surge in blood pressure. A doctor had to rush in to stabilize him. At the same time, radar picked up a presence directly overhead at about 1,000 feet, as if something was watching them. But when the team replayed the footage, all they had was a hazy glowing patch, shapeless and elusive. The portal in the sky. Perhaps the most shocking moment came when the team launched rockets with onboard sensors straight through the atmosphere above the ranch. On radar, a strange void corridor appeared, an invisible channel where signals were abruptly blocked. Infrared cameras captured something even stranger, a massive dark mass hanging in the sky. It wasn't a cloud, it wasn't weather. One stunned team member blurted out, "There's something above us, a doorway, or a massive object hiding in plain space." The incident immediately echoed reports from both the Sherman family and NIDS years before, accounts of glowing gateways opening in the sky, and dark entities crawling out from within. The invisible pressure. The team also began to realize that phenomena at the ranch were not only about seeing or hearing, but about physical sensation. Several investigators experienced sudden dizziness, sharp headaches, even mild skin burns, as if struck by bursts of radiation. At times, Geiger counters confirmed spikes of high radiation in localized spots, but just as quickly as they appeared, the readings would vanish, leaving behind nothing but questions and lingering unease. Conscious intelligence. One hypothesis suggests that the ranch may sit atop some unknown geological or natural energy source. But what unsettled the researchers most was not the energy itself. It was the way phenomena seemed to act intentionally, surfacing precisely when experiments were underway. This raised a disturbing question. What if it isn't a natural force at all, but an intelligence, aware, reactive, and deliberate? The uninvited guests. Once the show aired, Skinwalker Ranch was no longer a secret corner of Utah. People began to arrive, from UFO researchers and ghost hunters to curious thrill seekers and even tourists. But those who slipped past the steel gates rarely walked away unchanged. Some suffered temporary memory loss, others broke out in sudden rashes. A few reported their cars mysteriously shutting down in the middle of the dirt road with no mechanical explanation. The ranch security team described chasing off intruders who climbed fences in the dead of night. Strangely, when asked why they came, most gave the same answer. Something out there was calling us. A global UFO hotspot. Thanks to the secret of Skinwalker Ranch, the property transformed into a worldwide focal point for UFO discussion. No longer confined to fringe circles, the mysteries of the ranch caught the attention of mainstream science. Some physicists argued that this was a unique opportunity to study unknown phenomena. Others dismissed it as made-for-TV entertainment. But whether believer or skeptic, few could ignore the footage. Rockets vanishing mid-flight, black figures inside abandoned homesteads, electromagnetic surges crippling technology. Even the U.S. Department of Defense took notice. In 2021, when the Pentagon delivered its long-awaited UFO report to Congress, reporters explicitly invoked Skinwalker Ranch as one of the natural observatories of the phenomenon. What's the truth? At present, explanations split along three major paths: unusual geology and natural energy. Some argue the Uintah Basin harbors radioactive minerals or natural electromagnetic fields, producing hallucinations and equipment failures. Yet this fails to explain the humanoid shadows or zigzagging craft in the sky. UFOs/extraterrestrial activity ranch lies within a corridor long associated with UFO sightings. Could it be a landing zone or an observation post for an advanced non-human civilization? A supernatural intelligence, Skinwalker. Drawing from Navajo legend, others believe the ranch is less a UFO base and more a stage for a shape-shifting, manipulative intelligence, one that thrives on fear, not science. And what does Brandon Fugal say? After years of silence, Brandon Fugal finally stepped publicly into the spotlight. He declared, "I purchased the ranch as a skeptic. But after what I have personally witnessed, UFOs, radiation anomalies, shadow figures, I am forced to admit, this phenomenon is real. No one could fabricate something of this complexity." His words chilled many listeners. For this was not an obscure ghost hunter, but a billionaire businessman, a man with no apparent incentive to fabricate such a tale. The land of uncertainty. When Fugal spoke, scientists at various conferences nodded, not necessarily in agreement, but in recognition. Skinwalker Ranch has become a symbol of humanity's greatest fear, the unknown that refuses to be pinned down. For decades, the ranch has hosted nearly every type of paranormal phenomenon imaginable: immortal wolves, UFOs, glowing portals, cattle mutilations, shadowy figures gliding past windows. Each of these alone could sustain its own legend. But at the ranch, they all converge, weaving together in ways that defy any single explanation. A cosmic crossroads. One bold hypothesis claims the ranch may lie on a cosmic seam, a place where the membrane between our dimension and another is thin enough to rupture. This could explain why portals sometimes appear, why UFOs emerge from nowhere, why a massive wolf can vanish on open ground. Perhaps they are simply visitors slipping across worlds before disappearing back again. But the larger question remains: why here? Why the Uintah Basin and not Nevada's deserts or the depths of the Amazon, or just the theater of an intelligence? Others argue the ranch is not a portal at all, but a stage. On it, an unseen director, a conscious intelligence of unknown origin, plays games with human perception. Notice the pattern. Phenomena almost always occur when there are observers, but never clearly enough to be proven. EMF spikes appear exactly when measurements are taken. A shadow glides past only when a camera is recording. UFOs streak by for seconds, long enough to ignite belief, but too brief for hard analysis. As if someone or something wants humans to hover forever on the edge, caught between belief and doubt, fear and fascination. The ranch, a mirror of fear. Perhaps this is why Skinwalker Ranch holds such a grip on the imagination. It is not merely a location, it is a mirror reflecting the deepest terrors of the human condition. The fear of predators lurking in the dark, the giant wolf. The fear of being watched from above, the UFO. The fear of curses that cannot be broken, the Navajo skinwalker. The fear of science itself failing, broken instruments, doctors unable to explain illness. It gathers all these fears into one place. And when millions of viewers watch the series, they too are pulled into the spiral, caught between the desire to know the truth and the dread that if the truth is ever revealed, life will never feel safe again. So, what is Skinwalker Ranch? The answer may never be final. Each generation, each research team leaves with data, yet none can unlock the puzzle. And perhaps that is the true curse of the ranch. It never allows anyone to hold the full truth. Brandon Fugal, Robert Bigelow, the Sherman family. All of them walked away changed forever by what they experienced. Yet not one of them can stand up and say, I know with 100% certainty what Skinwalker Ranch really is. The ranch, a mirror of fear. Perhaps this is why Skinwalker Ranch holds such a grip on the imagination. It is not merely a location, it is a mirror reflecting the deepest terrors of the human condition. The fear of predators lurking in the dark, the giant wolf. The fear of being watched from above, the UFO. The fear of curses that cannot be broken, the Navajo skinwalker. The fear of science itself failing, broken instruments, doctors unable to explain illness. It gathers all these fears into one place. And when millions of viewers watch the series, they too are pulled into the spiral, caught between the desire to know the truth and the dread that if the truth is ever revealed, life will never feel safe again. So, what is Skinwalker Ranch? The answer may never be final. Each generation, each research team leaves with data, yet none can unlock the puzzle. And perhaps that is the true curse of the ranch. It never allows anyone to hold the full truth. Brandon Fugal, Robert Bigelow, the Sherman family. All of them walked away changed forever by what they experienced. Yet not one of them can stand up and say, I know with 100% certainty what Skinwalker Ranch really is. Somewhere in the Uintah Basin, behind the steel fences and warning signs that read no trespassing, a doorway still lingers. Perhaps it leads to another world. Perhaps it is nothing more than the trick of an unseen intelligence. Or perhaps it is simply the place where humans are forced to confront their deepest fears. But one thing is certain. When night falls over Skinwalker Ranch and you see two glowing green lights staring at you from the darkness, you will never truly know, are they the eyes of a wolf, a UFO from distant space, or the very presence the Navajo warned of centuries ago, the Skinwalker. And that is the story of Skinwalker Ranch, the land where every boundary between real and unreal seems to dissolve. Whether you believe in UFOs, monsters, or are simply drawn to mysteries that defy explanation, Skinwalker Ranch remains a place that chills anyone who dares look closer. It may be a gateway to another world, or only the cruel game of an invisible mind. But one thing is undeniable. We have never truly understood this place. If you'd like me to continue exploring legends like these, from the haunted Amityville house in New York to the vanishing lakes of Alaska that seem to swallow people whole, don't forget to like and subscribe. It gives me the motivation to dig deeper into the mysteries that send shivers down the world's spine. And turn on the notification bell, because in the next video we'll journey to a site even more chilling, a place so strange that even the US military admits it cannot control it. Until then, remember this. If you ever find two glowing eyes watching you in the dark, pray they belong to nothing more than a cat. Good night, and see you soon.